morning. How are you, buddy?
Great. Good to see you, Brent.
The great and powerful Brian Schrauger, who has proven that the pen is mightier than the sword. He is a man that's putting journalism into full action right there in the Middle East. Hey, your post yesterday was great. You had a great article and video post that came out yesterday describing the New World Order. You're talking about China and everything that's happening in the world of financial changes, the world that we live in, where we have, it used to be military strength, and now it's financial strength, and China's playing into that. And I mentioned to you this before we started, you spell out Armageddon without saying it. It's essentially like all roads lead back to Israel being a problem for it, not just Iran, but Russia and China. They're trying to just basically move through, and the one thing stopping them from moving through is the country of Israel and the Jewish population. So at some point, you got to remove that in order to make all of your plans work. That's the way I kind of interpreted some of your message, but just kind of briefly give a summary of yesterday's report and why you brought that to the End Times community.
Well, there is a new world order that is being formed. It began about 15 years ago, and I don't think in the West we're very much aware of it. It started, 2009, right after Barack Obama became president, and it was an announcement of these 5 nations that they were forming a economic forum to take the place of the G7. The goal is to replace the dollar as the world's primary currency. But what they didn't have, what most of the member nations didn't have, was the economic clout or the resources to kind of move in that direction to take on the West competitively and have a chance. Well, one member did, and that member is China. China is vast. It's absolutely huge. It's got these immense natural resources, and it has embraced, interestingly enough, as a communist country, it's embraced a form of capitalism. So in China today, their infrastructure and their cities, and they're all the very latest, the very best. They really far exceed what we have in the United States, and really I think in almost any place else in the world. High-speed trains, everything is paid for digitally. People just scan their phones. Hardly any cash is used. So they have the money, they have the resources, and they have the motivation to do this. And in fact, 13 years ago, I think it was, China announced this thing called One Bridge, One Road. And it really is attempting to resurrect an ancient trade route from, about 3,000 years ago called the Silk Road. Mm-hmm. The Silk Road was an overland transport, very dangerous, but a lot of really valuable goods were transferred, including silk, which was worth far more than gold, right? In those days, silk was absolutely precious. It sold for what we in today would be hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you will, per ounce. So anyway, that was a Silk Road, but China said, look, we need to do this again. We need to build an infrastructure where we can get goods and services to the known world, to the world, at least on our continents. And for them, that means Southeast Asia. It means the Far East, the Middle East. It means Africa, and it means Europe. Mm-hmm. And I think lots of times because in America, we tend to think we're the whole world. We don't realize how big the world is out there and how wealthy and it is, and the opportunities it presents economically. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's really unique about China is that it really isn't attempting to conquer the world militarily. It has some military issues, like it really wants Taiwan back or it wants to own Taiwan, take over Taiwan. That seems to be a kind of a bugaboo with them. But primarily, at least the way it looks to me, the development of their military is intended to defend their economic development. When you have assets, you want to protect them. And what they're developing are means of transport for goods and services around the world. If you just do even a cursory Google search um, you'll see these awesome things they've done and are doing. They're building a road through the Himalayas at great risk. A lot of people are dying. They're building these massive ports for their ships to come in and drop off goods, trade, to go back and forth. They have pipelines. Of course, they want oil and gas. In fact, one of their biggest sources for oil and gas is Iran. And, they have an overland a railroad system. And I think it's in Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan, one of those stans, where the railroad, it's a major port. This country is landlocked, but the railroad comes into that country, and it's a huge station, if you will. And they have to do that because the width of the train track changes from China to Russia. And so for the train to go up through Russia, everything has to go over to different trains, different train cars at least, that fit on a different track. And what they're doing is absolutely stunning. Now, they have, as I mentioned in the report yesterday, they have a lot of economic weaknesses that they're facing. They've built this thing so fast. So far, I think like 1.5 trillion have gone into it, but the danger that they have, they build it fast, and so when you build something fast, it may not be all that sound. And one thing that they've done is they have developed massive amounts of real estate within the country that are empty. I saw one report, something like for every person in China, which is 1.5 billion people, there are like 3 possible places for them to live. So 2 out of 3 places are not occupied.
Wow.
Huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
And they did that because in China you can't really make much money from wages. But they did set up a system where if you want to make money, invest in real estate. And so the whole population has been sold this idea, we can invest in real estate and get wealth that way. And it's a big problem. If it was an open economy, this whole thing would have burst a long time ago. But because it's closed, they're able to keep a lid on it. Another big problem they're facing is a demographic problem. You might remember back in, in the 80s, I think it was, that they tried to put forth this one child policy. So if you were a married couple in China, you could only have one child. Well, that created an environment where parents did that, and then they poured everything into that one child. And it created this kind of culture. They're very, very competitive people, and even today, the children and the child of a Chinese couple, they pour everything into it. They put tremendous pressure on that kid to achieve and succeed. And they put a vast amount of money into it. And so as a result, even though China's now changed, they no longer have a one-child policy. It's already, they're trying to get people to have more children, but people aren't doing it.
Yeah, so socially speaking, they're just not inclined to do that. And, I was in China in 2007. We flew into Hong Kong, went to Shanghai, went to Xi'an, saw the Terracotta Warriors, went to Beijing. And what I can say about China is, first of all, if you go to China, you have to read the book China Road, which talks about the road from Shanghai. It goes all the way across. It's that Silk Road and the diversity of that road. And what you realize is you start in Shanghai, which was really colonized by the French and other groups. It's a very European feeling city. Like if you go to Shanghai, you don't feel like, and there's certain parts of it, it's almost a Spanish, French feeling to it. You're in Hong Kong, it's just one big giant concrete jungle. Bunch of people there. There's always tension there between Hong Kong and Beijing. There's always been tension there. They kind of have this flux of, governmental control and going back and forth with kind of what the citizens of Hong Kong feel like is their mother country, because they always want some sort of separation there, or China comes back and takes control. So there's tension there. There's tension all across China. The people there are frustrated, but they can't say anything because the government has them on lockdown. There's unrest in the country all the time. And if enough of those 1.5 billion people marched on Beijing and just took it over, they could. but there's not communication in place because they've got all the communication under control. So
Right.
you stop the unrest quickly,
Right.
and it doesn't spread, and they just kind of have really kind of had good fortune all along the way. The Chinese government has to keep people from just completely going mad over what's happening. But then you go to the very far western part of China, and it's a majority of a Muslim population there with the Uyghur group,
Right.
and they're being tortured. They're being put in basically concentration camps and work camps.
Right.
And so what China has what they have as their advantage is they can just throw people at problems. They can throw people at the railroads, at the the technology. If they die, okay, we've got 1.5 billion of them.
Right.
And they're really just trying to exercise their ability to take over the world however they possibly can. And during COVID, you saw the supply chain issues that we have. We're so dependent upon China from a resource standpoint that they do control us in large parts. And one of the things, just as an American, that makes me a little bit nervous because I grew up with Rocky Balboa going over to Russia, fighting, for the American people. And America's been this great superpower since the '80s. You just feel like we're unstoppable. But then when you see, all these Chinese government leaders and Russia leaders and Middle Eastern leaders gather together and go, we want to take down the American dollar, good things don't last forever. So you're kind of a little bit nervous that we're missing the boat, that China is going to partner with the right people. They're going to take over, and we will have a digital currency or something that ties back into those communities. And at that point, what do? I mean, you're basically having to succumb to the New World Order, like you mentioned.
Well, in fact, that's where the crossroad meets in Israel, is in this whole digital realm. If you look on a map at the Belt and Road, the seaway, the path that ships take by sea to transport things, and then the overroad, they don't actually come into Israel. They go just north of Israel, and then they come up through the Red Sea, through the canal there, and then they go into the Mediterranean. But what does come to the center is this whole digital, it's actually, they call it the digital Silk Road. And at the very center of that is, in fact, Israel. And they're coming to Israel. They've already been here. There's an agreement between Israel and China right now to help them develop this digital Silk Road. But the unique thing about the involvement of Israel is that Israel is the only country that China is looking for to get information instead of give or sell something that they're putting together. And Israel's been very on the cutting edge of technology. We saw that just yesterday, right? With all of these pagers that exploded in Lebanon, these Hezbollah pagers. I mean, it's absolutely, it's such a fun story because of what Israel managed to do. But before we get to that, this whole idea that Israel could very well be in a position to enable China to manage this whole thing. It's a huge, huge, huge complex of economic transport, and it requires supervision. And it actually is going to take it's going to take artificial intelligence. It's going to take ultra high tech, and China is also is rolling out its digital yuan, which is its currency there. And almost everybody in China is using it for their everyday purchases. That's why many people don't have cash. You just use your phone, you scan if you buy whatever you buy. So inasmuch as they're able to make that feasible, they're going to need it secure. And Israel could very well be a manager could be contracted, right? I could see China, although it might not be China, it might be BRICS. I don't think China has any interest in being the leader of this new world order. I think their main interest is to be the economic engine of it.
Yes, very much so.
So they could be the economic engine while someone else, some charismatic person, comes on the scene, right, with answers for things, but behind the scenes, the engine running it would be this China economic one road, one belt economy, which everyone would benefit from and want to share in. Well, anyway, that's what's developing, and it's very, very interesting to think about. It's not just oil and gas. It's not just one commodity that is moving the nations in the direction of the Middle East. Mm-hmm. It's actually a globalized economic development program.
Yeah, well, it's a great report. And for those out there who haven't seen it, go to endtimes.com, check it out. Brian Schrauger did a great job kind of communicating what's happening in that part of the world and the behind the scenes, just the movement, the players that's happening both on the tech side and also just on the diplomatic strategy side. It's a very important story that most people aren't paying attention to. Over in the United States, we can get tunnel vision with our news stories. Of course, former President Trump was almost assassinated again. I mean, how close can you get to this guy without the Secret Service, figuring out there's a guy that was, 300 yards away, it was definitely within range for this guy to take out President Trump for the second time. So it's crazy. So we hear that, but what's more important than I think, that right now, of course, that was a big news headline. It seems like the first assassination attempt was like overwhelmingly surprising, but the second one's like, yeah, well, all right, let's move on. We got the Dallas Cowboys. They lost this weekend. Let's move on to the next news story. And so we are dealing with Beepergate today. And when I grew up, the only thing that I knew was that people who carried beepers were either pimps and drug dealers or doctors.
Right.
There was not a lot of other people that carried beepers. And so now beepers aren't really a huge thing here. I guess there's certain maybe jobs that would still require a beeper for access if there's not a cell tower that's reliable. I don't know who would use because I don't even know what you call from once you got a pager. Somebody calling you. Because you get the pager, you see it, you go to the payphone, or go to the local phone, and then you call back whoever. Hey, who is this?
Right.
But talk about Beepergate, and I'm going to share my screen with this news article I saw from the Wall Street Journal. This is a new one this morning that was just talking about how Israel kind of interjected into the supply chain to install these explosive devices within there, which I think is genius. Like, that's supervillain level.
Really is.
It's awesome.
Remarkable. The Hezbollah has been trying to avoid cell phones for some time, and all the more so since Israel took out its senior commander on July 30 in Beirut with a missile that went right to where he was sleeping in Beirut. So in this massive city, they killed him with a missile, and the sense of it was that missile was guided or knew where to go because of his cell phone's GPS, right? So the word went out. Everybody, Hezbollah was actually forcing their members to they were taking the phones away from them. And so everybody had to go to a system where there wasn't GPS that could guide a missile to them. And so they went with pagers. And what's interesting is Israel was anticipating this because this had to be put together months and months ago. So when this guy Fuad Shukar was assassinated in Beirut, that was July 30. So this had to have begun before that. And what Israel did is it went into the supply chain. Yes, it went into the primary seller or the most popular seller of this product made in Thailand. But they went to a company, apparently they went to a country in Hungary. By the way, I need to say this, Israel has not confirmed that it did this. Okay?
Well,
officially.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it was the U.S. or another ally, I wouldn't know who it would be.
And everyone here's a wink and nod, okay, yeah, we know. But it looks like they went into the supply chain and they had 1 to 2 ounces of explosive put inside these pagers, which were then sold or distributed to Hezbollah. That alone is just an amazing accomplishment. How did they do that? And then all these Hezbollah operatives had these pagers with explosive whatever in the explosives in them. And what are they going to do? And they were carrying them around for months. So There was an assassination attempt by Hezbollah a few days ago against some unnamed government official here, and there's one sense as well, this was retaliation for that. I tend to think more it was a very ingenious outside-the-box kind of thinking. How do you stop, or how do you slow down, not stop, but how do you at least slow down an enemy that has 150,000 rockets and missiles in its arsenal ready to fire at you and kill thousands of Israeli citizens? You know, most of us would think, well, you have to have an army go on the boots on the ground, go across the border. You have to bomb them. You have to flood, you know, somehow get to their tunnels. And there's all this conventional thinking. Well, what Israel did in this case, assuming it was Israel, yeah, wink, they went outside the box, and the thinking was, okay, how do these bombs get triggered? How do they get launched? How do the drones get launched? Well, people have to do it, and they have to use their hands. Well, what if we were able to stop them from easily being able to use their hands? And that's what happened. I mean, before these things were exploded yesterday at about 3:30 in the afternoon, Israel, Lebanon time, the pagers all went off, which meant you pick it up to look at it, right? Boom.
Yeah.
And so now, I think like 12 people died, but a lot of people were very, very injured. You know, they lost a hand. It's also a very nice way going forward to find out if someone is an operative with Hezbollah. You know, show me your hands.
Exactly.
You know, and it makes it difficult then for them to actually carry out any kind of sophisticated attack on Israel, because they have to fire guns, they have to push buttons, and it's going to be hard. It also has undermined their confidence. You know, it's put them in chaos. Hezbollah is regarded as kind of an elite thing, right? And very, very smart.
As compared to like Hamas?
Yeah, as compared to Hamas, very much so.
Yeah. But they're kind of working together in some ways. I mean, they're
Well, Hezbollah has been supporting Hamas by firing on the north of Israel, and they have hosted some Hamas people in Lebanon, but they're separate, and they would be like, I don't know, special forces to regular army, if you will, and they really are elite. Well, I love too that Hezbollah means party of Allah, right? Well, the party of Allah has not had a lot of support from Allah in the last few months. Schrauger was killed. One of their number 2 guys, commander, was killed in Lebanon with this incredible accurate attack. And then, what was it, August 13 or something like 13, 14, Hezbollah was prepared to do this major strike against Israel in retaliation for the assassination of Schrauger. What happened? Well, that morning, Israel, an hour or so before, launched sent 100 jets and helicopters and maybe some drones into Lebanon, and they took out launchers and launch sites. Well, it was a major defeat at that point. I mean, they thwarted this big attack. Yes, some rockets came through, but nothing like what was planned. And then yesterday. So in the course of 6-8 weeks, they've been very, very embarrassed. You know, have you seen some of the memes out there?
No, I haven't.
They're hilarious. One shows a pager and it says "Shalom." You know, I saw one that was put together by AI, Hezbollah operatives now moving to carrier pigeons.
You want some sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger line, like "Hasta la vista," something like that. You know, that's what we're all craving, is that one line where it's this grand scheme that comes down to somebody pushing the enter button, message sent, and you know it's all the bad guys feeling the pain. It was pretty incredible to see it. It's pretty incredible when a plan like that works. If it was Israel, it makes a lot of sense. If it was somebody else, I would think that would be in some sort of correlation with Israeli interests, because you know they're wanting to inflict pain on a group that's already trying to inflict pain back on them. And I think it's important to realize that. Um, so coming up on your schedule, with what's happening over there, what does the world look like for you coming up the next week?
Well, we're all kind of moving almost against our will toward the high holy days, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and in Jewish tradition there are prayers of repentance on Yom Kippur, and supposedly it's a way to wipe the slate clean, and last year all of this was done, and then October 7 happened. It's created a real, if you will, crisis of faith for a lot of Israelis who are observant. How are we going to do it this year? How can we say these prayers? How can we do these things? And not only did it happen, but it is, we still have hostages being held by Hamas. So yeah, it's a crisis. Shuls here are trying to figure out how to do this. Synagogues, everywhere you go. This is a big deal. Mm-hmm. I will be. It looks like I'll be up north for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Well, maybe not. No, probably not. More likely for Sukkot. Sukkot, which is the Feast of Trumpet days. It's about 8 or 9 days, which is where I was last year with my fiancée and her family on October 7. So it will be interesting to see if we have any rockets that come over. And if they do, I'll try to take a picture of them and post it up.
Yeah. That one video we posted from you of you on the balcony with all the rocket fire that was happening.
From Iran,
and,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was incredible. I mean, we don't get that here. There's things blasting off in the sky. It's typically fireworks here. So to think that y'all were that close to some of the danger, it's just incredible. We don't have that here, especially in Texas. Now, we're having our Tipping Point conference this weekend, and I wish you could be here for it. I know a lot of people love hearing from you every week. The Tipping Point conference, we have 2 organizations I help run, XO Marriage and then Tipping Point Ministries for my father. XO Marriage, we do a Valentine's Day weekend conference every year, kind of celebrate love. I think for Tipping Point, my dad and I talked, I mentioned to him, it'd be great to gather people right before Rosh Hashanah, this Feast of Trumpets, that who knows when Jesus is coming back, but a lot of scholars and people who are familiar believe that the feasts were all fulfilled in the spring, like very accurately with the events of Christ. And then the fall feast have yet to be really all fulfilled. And whenever the language of the Bible and the second return of Christ has trumpets and harvest and all these terminologies, Rosh Hashanah being the Feast of Trumpets, it makes sense that that's a very important feast for the determination of the second coming of Christ. If it happens before, during, or after, who knows?
Right.
But having a celebration with saints is kind of, that's the impetus of this conference, is to come together, learn, be together, remembering that Christ is going to return. And I think we have over 2,500 people signed up for live, and then we have over 1,000 people on the live stream, and that will grow even as this week comes. So we'll have thousands of people joining, and I'm excited about the conference this weekend, but at some point we need to get over here for the conference.
That'd be great. Maybe if we're still here next year, we could do it in conjunction with the Sukkot, the Feast of Trumpets, something like that. I don't know. We'll see. But I have followed what is happening with the conference. I'm really thrilled to see that there's going to be a time of prayer, and either in the night or in the morning. I think your dad is going to lead it for Israel, and it's going to include prayer for Israel. And I'm really grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really good.
Oh, I should tell you too. You mentioned rockets coming in, right? And that is, I got up a bit early for me on Sunday morning because I had to prepare my report for Tipping Point, and was making breakfast. And it's unusually cloudy here. It seems a bit early for the clouds to come in. But my window's open, nice cool air come in, and then I hear this, went on and on and on. Thunder? What's going on? I looked out. It didn't look like the clouds were thick enough to form thunder. My first thought was there must be an unexpected amount of rain coming in. Well, it still sounded somewhat like thunder. I just kept fixing my breakfast. And then once I sat down, I saw the news that, in fact, this missile had landed, or bits of it had broken up, had landed actually inside Israel, kind of over toward Tel Aviv. And it was fired from Yemen. And apparently it arrived over thousands of miles to Israel in like 11 minutes. So it had supersonic speed. I don't think it was really high tech. I don't think it had the ability to change course. But still, it created a big question. How did it get here without being intercepted by Israel? And how come we weren't able to take it down? How were they able to? How were the Houthis able to get that missile? It had to come from Iran. Mm-hmm. So anyway, yeah, that was sobering.
And what were they targeting?
Well, basically, it was the center of Israel, kind of just east of Tel Aviv. At least that's where it kind of came down. They probably were targeting Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm. Casualties?
Pardon?
Were there casualties?
No casualties, which thank God. Mm-hmm. Again, we were protected there. But it was the Houthis who just a month or so ago sent a drone that did land in Tel Aviv and did cause at least one death, maybe two, and it just about hit. I don't know if it was the U.S. Consulate there. The embassy, of course, is in Jerusalem. But yeah,
the beeper thing. That's the one thing that I don't really understand how they can protect themselves against. If you have these drones, thousands of drones launched in the right fashion, from the right rooftop, the right area, I don't know how you would stop that from if they have explosive devices or some sort of laser pointed technology that could accurately target citizens, facial recognition. This kind of technology exists right now, and it hasn't been deployed because I think once you let that genie out of the bottle, you're opening yourself up to massive, massive, massive consequences.
Well, I suspect that's what future warfare is going to look like. I think when Israel gets attacked, it's probably going to be thousands and thousands of drones coming in. There may be some missiles and rockets and so forth, but the drones can, you knock down a bunch and a bunch still get in. Now, what is encouraging on the other side is that it looks like Israel's about to roll out, at least on a trial basis, something called Iron Beam. It's been developing for some time, where they are able to shoot things down using a laser light. And the range has been increased from like 1 mile when it was first announced. Now it's up to 4.5 miles. And of course, they're working to make it even farther, work better. But it can act very quickly, and it's also much, much cheaper. Right now, Israel's spending like $500,000 every time it fires an Iron Dome missile to intercept something. And wow. So these beam shots will just cost whatever the electricity is. And so maybe $3 or $4 per shot. So Israel's certainly aware that this is something it has to work on, because drones have been getting through largely from Hezbollah into the north without being intercepted.
Yeah. Well, assembling a drone seems to be a little bit easier too. I mean, if you're working with people who are inside the country, they could assemble a drone probably fairly easy without it being setting off all these alarms, because drones seem to be fairly ubiquitous in at least this part of the world. They're not scary objects right now. I mean, if you saw a drone flying, because like, for example, my boys play football. They got coaches on the other side. They have drones that they're recording the whole game, flying over your head. We don't interpret those as being hostile objects in the sky. But at some point, I would be very leery of it. And Larry Ellison, for example, Oracle CEO and founder, just recently said that AI tracking, if it was on a global scale, could really help to make citizens good people.
I saw that. Right.
And
Yeah,
I mean, if you have AI tracking people and you have drones and all the things that are in sci-fi films,
right.
there's that movie with Tom Cruise, Minority Report,
Oh yeah, yeah,
where they
yeah.
can kind of predict people having,
Right,
murderous
right,
intentions, and they arrest them before they actually have that happen. But they have these little objects that can kind of go into homes and into people's, rooms under doors, and they scan their eyes,
right, right.
and that's not too far off from where we are right now.
Yeah,
And
very much
even
so.
when you're walking through it, like he was walking through a mall, and they could scan the eye and
Right,
send visual displays,
right.
advertisements just for that person based
Exactly.
upon their eye scan. And we are so
That's
close to
happening
that
to
as
all of us
well.
right now when we go on Facebook or when we go on YouTube.
I know.
It knows our preferences, and so it's showing us videos and products based on our behavior. So again, we're very much on the cusp of that becoming a reality. Yeah, and it's interesting too because the technology you're talking about is exactly what they're using now and doing in China, kind of coming back to China. And so China has really developed this. All of their citizens are under 24/7 surveillance.
Yeah. Well, with Hezbollah's pagers and beepers, I would imagine all of them will have PTSD for a while on that. They won't want to pick up I would think
Right.
they wouldn't want to pick up a smartphone for a while. I'd be
No.
nervous. I'd be
Right.
going back. I'd be going
Yeah.
back to the old see-through phones, cable to a wall. I'd be trying to figure out how to go old
It's like they
school.
took out thousands of these operatives. I mean, like some say 4,000 people were injured by this, and so it was a way to take out the operatives in a heavy population, really with minimal civilian casualties. Uh, Again, that's another part of the genius here,
It is
that
genius.
operation.
Speaking of genius, Brian, you are a genius over there, helping us every week with great reporting. Sponsored by Under Armour. Thank you, Under Armour, for sponsoring Brian this week and bringing bringing great achievements to the world of journalism is Brian Schrauger. So, hey, good talking to you, buddy. Have
Likewise.
a great week, blessed week, and we'll be praying for you.
All right, thanks.